Hi, Verada. This is Tim Carey. I was just checking to see if you could hear me.
Yes, Tim.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. By the way, which time zone you are in?
Central North America, Chicago time, Dallas, Fort Worth. Yourself?
Okay. Mine Indian time. It's
Yeah.
about 8 p.m.
Yeah. Well, this isn't so bad. This is why I tried to put this before the network architecture, not after it, right? So you guys can at least get a reasonable evening.
Absolutely. Well, what's the time there?
It's 10, well, it will be 10 a.m.
Oh,
Our time. So it's 8 a.m. Pacific, 8
oh,
p.m. your time. So it's actually, it hits a lot of sweet spots there as
yeah,
much
yeah,
as I can.
totally. Yes, absolutely.
And just to let you know, this is recording. So just to give you a heads up.
Yes, yes, yeah. I got the message. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi Tim. Hi Varda.
Morning, Saishi.
Hi, Shishu.
Hey, hi Varda. Hey Tim. Tim, it's night for us, by the way.
8 p.m. for you guys, right?
No, it's 8:30 p.m. for us in India.
Oh, 8:30. Okay. Yeah. So it's 8 a.m. for the Pacific crowd. It's 10 a.m. for me and 8:30
Yeah,
p.m. for you guys. It's like
right, right, right.
dealing with
And
the
it's gonna
world.
change
What do
very
you do?
soon. Yeah, it's gonna change very soon once the DST is in effect, right? The winter is coming.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, I didn't think there's a week off that you guys do daylight savings time, don't you?
No, we don't. In India, we don't. We are pinned to the UTC actually.
Oh
We
well,
don't change.
okay. So you guys will go 1 hour later, really, right? You're 8.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Sorry
So
about that.
again, the same issues which we have with Neptune is gonna come here too, actually.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. It's like how do you solve so so
We
really the
solve the
person that
problem usually by pinning it to UTC. We usually pin it to UTC, not to the PST or EST,
yeah.
because even in Europe, in other places, you have a different time zone. I mean, you have a different cycle for the DST effect, right?
Yeah. Oh, that piece of it. Yeah. So yeah, but Neftio has always done the specific time as the base.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I just leave it go. I go with the flow on that.
yeah. Yeah, sure. Hey, hi, Saga.
Yeah, hi. Hi,
Hey,
everyone.
Alexi.
All right, I'm going to give everyone about 2 more minutes to come in, and then we'll get started, guys. Just to let everyone know that this is a recording, so um, you've been warned. I'm not sure where these recordings go, but it's a
It
recording
usually happens
somewhere.
on the cloud.
Yeah.
It records on the cloud actually, but the problem is no one knows where the cloud key is actually, right? So we
Oh,
are safe.
that's what I'm saying is that it says it's recording to the clock. I just don't know where it is.
Yeah, you require the host key. You require the host key, and that is the whole point, right? That's a
But
$1 million question.
but at least at least you have the location, right? I don't even know where that's at.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, usually the guys with the host key can only access it.
Yeah,
So till you don't have it, it's all fun.
yeah, that's right. Okay. So hey, let's just get started then. I like to start on time if I can. So this is the October 25th meeting of the ORAN integration working group 2 for SIG 1. We have an agenda here that I put in place. So I'll just go through the agenda items real quick and see if anyone has anything else that they want to discuss or we'll try to get in. Again, as I'll put these agendas out every week, right? So as you want to have topics to talk to, you're certainly welcome to add to the agenda, right? I might move things around, but I'll try to honor what you're trying to ask for. Okay, so what we have is there was some information that came in about the LNF that we'll just do that, and we'll do an approval and a review of the previous minutes. There was that discussion that we had from last week that there was a request to go develop a broader architecture, and we did that, and it's in this link here that we need to have a big discussion on. There's some discussion as well that for ourselves that we have to decide what dates that we're going to go to network architecture, network automation for release 3, because those groups really, one gives us the approval and the other has some dependencies on us for their work. So we're asking for what are the drop dead dates that we need to have for that, because guys, I'm telling you, there's only I counted them up between this year. What's left is, because of all the holidays, it's about 7 weeks or 7 times that we will meet together in this 1-hour session until the end of the year. Okay. And then and then there's also some agenda items that we'll just go through. The network architecture meeting that's every Monday. They're asking each of the working groups to give an update status. So I'll ask if there's any special things that you want us to note for that update for the status when I transfer it across. That's the agenda for today. Does anyone have anything that they feel need to be added at this point? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat, so this is what we're going to go with. I'm going to try to bound these in these particular pieces. So the first one is just to let you guys know there is an LNF event. Timo sent it out, and he asked for if there's any people that want to present toward it, topics. I don't know, I haven't heard from the group, but if there's anyone in the group that has some ORAN integration things that they want to present that are going to the Budapest, Hungary, if you could let the group know, just put it in the ORAN integration, and maybe we can discuss that, right? But right now, there wouldn't be anything from ORAN integration going into that element that I'm aware of. Okay. The status from the agenda from last week, asking for approval of this. Basically, we went through, and I'm not going to go through all the points, guys. It's just, does anyone have any objection to on the notes or on the agenda from last week?
Just a point. Actually, we corrected the notes, but I think the diagram is still showing OCloud. Tim, I was just checking the diagram which we were talking about. Where if we have the OMSI, the DMS IMS, right? The orange color thing to extra diagram is still showing. I mean, I'm talking of the diagram which Sagar has also reused. So that is still showing OCloud.
This diagram here is what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll fix that when we come up there. I guess the question I have
Sure.
is on the notes themselves of what we talked about. Does
Notes
anyone
is
have any objection to approving these notes?
So Tim, generally, I'm really glad you're being very methodical. But in generally, we don't do these steps. This particular step.
I understand. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
put some rigor into this so people understand what they have. So
Yeah.
I only asked for like 5 minutes. So
It's a good habit, by the way, Bala. So let's kick it up. Actually, we are habituated to have this all in ORAN now. ORAN actually follows this very strictly. Yeah,
Okay.
good to see that.
no, I just want to make sure people understand, that they're written and that we just go through. That's just a formal process to keep everyone available. Generally, I look at it as housekeeping, right? But it's boring until there's something that's interesting. It's really strange. So most of the time it's going to be boring, guys. So, okay. All right. And then, so this next topic is really talking about this integration deployment. And so if you remember from last week, we went through and we started looking at saying, okay, let's look at some of the objectives and ethics to say, what do we want to demonstrate for 2024, whether it's release 3 or release 4? And we stepped back from that, says, hey, let's develop an initial architecture to Nepio mapping, and then use Santa's diagram. So she gave me a diagram, and I took a little bit of Subesh's diagram and kind of mixed them together and created this deployment diagram that we'll show. And so what I'd like to do is spend about 30 minutes on this piece of it, so we can maybe have some discussion on the diagram. Again, the primary focus of this is to get some broader context and then talk about what we want to do in release 3. Let's do that first, and then we can talk about release 4 to begin with. So this was the diagram that we came up with. What I did is I took some stuff from Sana's network architecture diagram. I took some of the basis from Subash's architecture that he said for ORAN integration. I took the ORAN decoupled SMO specification to identify some of the existing SMO pieces of it, and I had conversations with both Seishu and Alexis about this diagram, right? And so that's the genesis of the diagram. We do have some comments from Joseph about this, but I just wanted to get let me do this. Let me just go through the diagram and what it means, and then we can have some comments on it and conversation about it. Okay. So this is for release 3, right? And so we have within release 3, we know that the ORAN architecture is comprised of some SMO services that comprise the RAN domain management, and these are the again the services that have been identified. Of particular interest in release 3 from discussions that we've had with Seishu so far is the discussions on using some cloud native principles for both FOCOM and NFO as it relates to their interactions with the IMS and the DMS. And in doing so, there was a thought that we would deploy these 2 functions, not the rest of the functions, but deploy these 2 functions in the workload cluster. Likewise, in the OCloud. Now, is this something you wanted? I'm sorry, Seishu, is this what you want to change somewhere in here?
The point is, it's not OCloud, right? OCloud is below it. So what we
OCloud is below the SMO.
Yes. But I mean, even Nefio is actually coming on OCloud. That's the point which I was highlighting. I don't know. You want to put it as a layer there, or you want to put it like they are deployed on top of OCloud?
I just wanted to show that there's a set of functions that will go into the cloud, right? So
yeah, but if you see Nefio here, you see Nefio down, right? Nefio as part of OCloud. That's what we discussed last week. Nefio will not become part of OCloud. Nefio will enable OCloud.
yes. So what do we want to put for this layer is my question.
OCloud should come down. I mean, the only thing I'm saying is it should be above the physical network, right? OCloud, we'll have the physical network, then we'll have the OCloud. On top of it is what we'll have all these enablers, and then we'll actually have SMO, which will be the entire piece of it puzzle, right? I'm just saying maybe OCloud should come little down.
All right. So what you're suggesting, and I just want to make sure I get the notes right, is we need to separate the cloud, OCloud, from the enabling. And what do you mean by enabling? The
enabling is adaptation. I mean, you can call it adaptation. You can call it the gelling point. I mean, whatever we want, the enabler, right? I'm basically talking about those interfaces which will lead us to OCloud, right? That's what Nefio will be. And as we discussed last time, yeah. But now in the diagram, that piece is being showed inside the OCloud layer. That layer of OCloud. I mean, on the right hand side when you say OCloud, right?
Yeah. So if you look at the specifications, an OCloud instance, right, has in itself an IMS, and it has, based upon per site, has a set of DMSs. And then
that is
then there are
not the client. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me finish. And then there are a set of ORAN network functions. That's what these are, that are deployed within a particular cluster on a particular site within a particular OCloud. So, given that, I'm trying to understand what you mean by these aren't in the OCloud.
Okay. What I mean to say is when you're talking about these interfaces, right? They are actually the server part of it or the consumer's part of it. And what we need enabler of it is actually the guy who will be hooking onto it, right? So what I'm trying to understand from this diagram is if you're saying this will be the part which will enable OCloud, then enable should come as a gelling point between the OCloud and this. That's the way we can also put it, right? That's one way of depicting it. Again, I'm not contradicting what is there here. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to put my question to understand.
Are you suggesting that southbound of, for example, southbound of the FOCOM and NFO, there's some enablers? There's an interface between?
I mean, if you want to put FOCOM and NFO, the entire SMO piece of it, right? We need something that will enable the SMO to interact with the OCloud, right?
Yes.
Right. And OCloud being the consumer for those interfaces, we need someone who can actually make this. And we talked about it yesterday, right? In Yumi and Saga were there in the call, along with Rafi, where we said this will be K8s profile and Etsy profile both. So we are talking of K8s profile specifically here. And for K8s profile, what I see is the enabler will be Nefio. The consumer of that will be the OCloud, right? So that's one way of looking at it.
Okay, so I'm looking at it. Then we need to expand maybe this piece of it, right? You know, well, I'm just going to take this piece for release 3 is what we talked about. Well, that was bad, but these pieces of it, and maybe we need to further expose or describe those enabling pieces. But you know, from my perspective, the OCloud, if I look at any specification within
That's fine.
ORAN,
I'm just saying about Nefio. Yeah, sorry. There was a small delay here. Sorry, yeah, go ahead. No, I understand what the point which you're trying to get from there, but here you put Nefio cluster down, right? That again, what I'm trying to address is Nefio is not. Now you're getting it. Yeah, Nefio is not the cluster itself. Cluster is enabled by Nefio. That's the point which I'm trying to. If you're putting Nefio inside the cloud, it is giving impression that.
So that was the question, right? So there's two pieces here, right? One is, are we going to actually deploy these functions in a Nefio cluster, or are these just Nefio enabled functions? And I think there's a difference because you can have, I would think, Nefio enabled interfaces, right? Functions without deploying it into a Nefio workload cluster, I think is what you're suggesting, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when you say Nefio, the cloud itself is not Nefio. Nefio is enabler for the cloud, or Nefio is the enabler for the cluster, right?
That's fine.
Here, the down point of it where you have Nefio management cluster, Nefio workload cluster, they are the functionalities which will make you deploy a cluster. They will actually help you to deploy a cluster, right?
Yes.
I don't want people to get confused that Nefio itself is providing you the cloud. Nefio. I mean, again, when I say providing, yes, Nefio will make you get a cloud, but the cloud itself is not Nefio, right? Here it shows that Nefio is a cloud.
Yeah, but we're going to have when we do development, you know, certainly what we're seeing today is, you know, I have an edge site, a central site, a regional site, right? And so those functions, when we have functions that are deployed using Nefio in all those 3 sites, right? And so we develop.
They are using Nefio, exactly.
Well,
yeah.
Sure. But it's a Nefio workload cluster that they're deployed in, right? Or a Nefio management cluster that they're deployed in by site definition. So that's where I'm struggling with the.
Okay, let me put this way.
I think
if you
we have a few raised hands. We have a few raised hands. So we could. So I think I know where just to add one point. I don't want to jump the line, but on this point, I think the way I think I'm understanding what Tim is trying to say. I think, see, at the end of the day, the work cloud obviously it provides the responsibility of the work cloud is providing some compute resources. When I say compute, I mean everything: compute, network, storage, everything. But at the time, it has the obligation to support certain interfaces. That interfaces could be the DMS and IMS interface. At this point of time, obviously, we know IMS is not completely defined. So it has to support those interfaces. So in this particular case, the way I understand is Tim is trying to convey Nefio is going to provide those interfaces by virtue of which it is acting like a work cloud. because if Nephew is going to provide the DMS interface, if Nephew is going to provide the IMS interface, when it's completion, when it's completely defined, then by virtue of which it is acting like a workload, because it is going to give you give you all the computer
Behavior.
information.
Yeah, but OCloud is pretty big than that. Bala, I understand that, but OCloud, when you say, right, that's a fabric on which you actually run the complete payloads, right?
Absolutely, hardware.
Interfaces.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the very reason I'm saying that's an enabler. I mean, what I'm saying is Nefio is enabler for you to OCloud, right? That's IMS and DMS piece, but that itself is not the OCloud. OCloud is a fabric on which you will actually have all those Gnode boosts. I mean, the right hand side things which you are seeing, right? The Gnode base, the payloads are being run. So what I'm trying to put it is, we can put OCloud as the fabric. Okay, I mean, you have the infra, you have the hardware infra, then you have the OCloud, and then Nefio is enabler for the OCloud where you have the IMS and DMS functionality being realized, right? I mean, again, I'm trying to put it in the layer structure. I know you're talking about two interfaces, but I don't want to have Nefio itself as OCloud. Nefio is an enabler for the OCloud, which is providing those two interfaces in line to what you just said.
Okay,
Right.
cool. That's fine. I think fine. I think so.
That's a depiction. Again, because when you say Nefio is OCloud, the way it was said before, no, Nefio is not OCloud. Nefio is enabler for OCloud, right? So there is a difference.
Providing the functionalities of the interface.
Yes. That too, IMS and DMS functionality to start with. But OCloud, when you talk about, it's a fabric, right? At the end of the day, it's a fabric where you'll actually launch all your applications or your workloads, right? That's the point which I'm trying to highlight.
Yeah, but the point is that there's actually a service. Okay, I'm trying to make sure that we don't lose this, right? There's a service interface, right, that is going to use Nefio principles, or it can use REST API principles in the case of the IMS, right? Or it's going to use Nefio principles and Kubernetes APIs in the case of the DMS, right? Those are actually services. Let me finish. Those are services that reside in the O Cloud and are enabled using Nefio artifacts, right? And so the question is, I don't want to lose that that idea, right? And so, what is the best way of depicting that idea, right? I don't have an issue even within the O Cloud of saying these are Nefio enablers, right? These two things are Nefio enabled, right? You know, the IMS is Nefio enabled, the DMS is Nefio enabled.
Yeah. I got it. I understand. That's what I mean. I want to make sure that we all understand that part of it, that we are talking of an entire layer there. In the layer, sorry, I was not trying to cut you short, Tim. I understood the moment you gave the first
go
step.
ahead, finish.
Sorry. So the moment you have the OCloud, you're talking about those two as enablers for that, or the interface points within the OCloud, which are being realized by Nefio, right? That's what you're trying to say by this diagram, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think Alexa, I think Alexa says it well. He says, you know, Nefio is a realization of an O Cloud node cluster, part of an O Cloud. The O Cloud has.
Have my raised hand for some time.
Okay.
And
so
I'm driving. I'm sorry. I'm driving. I don't have any other means of chatting. So
okay. So hang on, Robbie. Just let me finish this point, and then we'll get you. Okay. So then it says, you know, the O Cloud has to supply the O2 IMS, and each O Cloud node clusters, the Nefio workload clusters, need to supply the O2 DMS, which is what this is really trying to show. We're just using enabling technologies. So Robbie, go ahead. We'll get you next, then Rohit, and then Alexa.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks, Tim. I mean, few comments. One thing is, I think at least in the Nefio architecture till now, we don't distinguish anything like Nefio workload cluster, right? I mean, okay, when we say workload cluster, it primarily would mean that you're deploying a cluster to handle workload deployments. That is, and you're actively managing the network functions that you deploy in it and the LCM that goes along with it, right?
Right.
So in a sense that you are somehow, the idea would be that if you deploy a workload cluster, then you are also exposing certain kind of CRDs or certain APIs in the northbound, basically saying that, okay, I am responsible for this cluster and all the software that goes into this cluster, and this cluster is being primed for deploying certain network functions that comes from the northbound, right? So here, the way it's been shown, NFO for FOCOM and NFO, and this comes back to the point that I think even we were discussing last time, is that are we planning for NFO to build these kind of CRDs to deploy FOCOM and NFO? I mean, this goes.
Well,
I don't think this.
so I think that's the question I had to Seishu when I asked, are we going to deploy these functions into the workload cluster? And I don't care if we do or not, to be honest with you. But
No, but I don't think that goes. I mean, this kind of even syncs with Sana's diagram, where I don't know if yesterday you were there for the discussion with where I mean it was related to I mean from the DNTF forum, where they were actually showing the interfaces from the TM forum and the HC Sol kind of specification. I mean,
yeah,
idea was
I
to
was.
yeah. So there, the clear interface was, okay, we are actually interfacing with the service orchestration system, right? So here the orchestration system is the SMO. So the NFO should be kind of exposing services to the SMO so that it can basically support those APIs to handle the workload cluster deployments and network function deployments in the southbound, right?
Okay,
So,
all right. So I get it. I get it, Robbie. So let me take it from there for a second, so I get what you're saying. So what you're saying is that there are some NFO enablers, right, that are going to be used by FOCOM and NFO. But but the question I had was, and it's to Seishu, and the answer can be whatever you guys what you want it to be, Seishu. You're the OSC, right? So do you plan on taking the FOCOM as Robbie said appropriately, right? I think it was Robbie. Said appropriately was that do you plan on deploying those in a NFO workload cluster, or are you just plan on using enablers?
See, for me, enabler is actually someone who would provide me the interfaces and make my make my life easy to get that realization. Okay, let me put it this way. So if I understand correctly, the way I'm reading it diagram is that you have a cloud and you have different functionalities which are being exposed on it. From that perspective, it makes sense. Absolutely no problem. The only question I had again, I was not putting it as an argument. I was actually putting it as a question to understand, from my understanding, which is what my opening statement was. Just to understand, when you put OCloud there, are you trying to understand that? I mean, are you trying to depict OCloud as the guy who provides the IMS and DMS alone? If that's the case, it's not, right. It has other functionalities also. That is the right part to it, right? That's the right hand part which you have depicted.
Sure.
So the way I want to make sure is, I mean, again, as I said again, it was my query and I got my answer. Okay. I think I got my answer. Basically, what you're trying to depict here is like a 3D diagram. If I have to put it as a 3D diagram, you are showing the top view of it, where you have the OCloud fabric. Okay, that fabric actually has the interfaces, which is the enabler for you to have the IMS and DMS. The one way of doing it is actually through NFO, where NFO will be the enabler for you to have the IMS DMS entry points, and that entry points can then hook onto the existing things or the new things, or you can actually get up. It could be greenfield, it could be brownfield, and then you will actually have the enablers for that where SMO can hook onto and then call them. Right, that's how we are seeing it. So if I have to make a 3D diagram of it, you're showing me the top view of it, where OCloud is a fabric, and then you will actually have all these entry points to me, where you give me the IMS and DMS functionalities, and then the SMO can come and hook onto it, right? That's right. A better way of putting it, right? Okay, that's what my question, because the way you put the diagram here, I was reading it as a 2D diagram. If I read it through 2D diagram, it gives me a thing that, OCloud is on top, and these things are coming down. That's before the infra. So with that, it changes. I mean, that if it makes sense to you right now where I was coming from. For me, the reading of it was it is all below OCloud and before infra. Then if you are saying that it's going into the infra part, that was a confusion which I had. But now when I read it as a 3D diagram with 3-dimensional, where you are saying OCloud is a layer, and then you have all these entry points or the hook points which I can latch onto from the SMO perspective, that makes sense.
That's exactly what I was looking at, that second piece.
Yeah. That was my question, actually. So I was trying to clarify, when you put OCloud there, should I read it bottom up, or should I read it as a 3D from top down?
Let's get Rohit's comment?
One second. Let me just finish my. So, couple of more comments, Tim.
Oh, Robin.
So first thing, the first thing is like I would suggest when we talk about kind of network functions, right? In a sense, like workloads. I mean, you talk of workload cluster here. What is a workload within the ORAN context? What do you define as a workload within ORAN? So from my perspective, when you talk about a workload, you're talking primarily about it's a DU functions, a CUCP, CUP, your RIC, and your non-real-time RIC. So in the sense that anything that goes in an O cloud, right? So when you talk about workload cluster, in my perspective, it's basically a cluster that resides in an O cloud instance. So in that sense, from that picture that we have, even in our was it in our CADS document, I guess, so where you actually show a hierarchical view. If you were to take that, okay, O cloud is actually in a central, regional, an edge, or in a far edge, or basically in a cell site, your nephew should be sitting somewhere at a much higher level that says that, okay, I should be able to deploy workload cluster in any of these 4 hierarchical clouds. So
Yes,
in that, yeah. So I think you brought a very good point in terms of where does nephew sit. So we should be relating to this hierarchical cloud picture, so that nephew is outside and you could deploy clusters in any of these O cloud instances and then direct your workload deployments anywhere in those of hierarchical clouds. So you have to define exactly what a workload means, even in the nephew context and ORAN context.
So, okay, so ORAN is correct. So when we have workloads, right, the things on the right are the workloads, just what you said. But there is platform software that resides at various sites and various the IMS and the DMS are services that are actually provided at various sites within the O cloud, right? The DMS is on a site, on a site basis, right? And so it's going to, it is got to, that software has to be deployed somewhere, right? Or for the services that implement those services. And so what we said was that the DMS as a service will have functionality that is deployed both in the management cluster and in a workload cluster. Likewise, there's some of the services themselves that for the IMS will be deployed in the as software, not as workload, but will be deployed as software in the management cluster. Right. That's the meaning of those two pieces of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you where the confusion comes. Sorry, again, I'll just put my point.
Just a second. Let's get some of these other ones. So
no, I won't add just one point. Yeah, Alexi, go ahead.
Rohit and myself, we've been waiting 20 minutes to speak.
I'm getting there. Rohit.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I think this diagram is a little bit confusing to me, because as per ORAN Alliance, that IMS request will start from the FOCOM, and the FOCOM will be part of the SMO and terminated at the IMS, where IMS will be the part of the O cloud. And here I can see that the nephew is part of both the layers. So isn't it the nephew should be the intermediate layer between the SMO and the O cloud? So I'm not clear on this part.
That's the point which I was trying to get, Rohit. Exactly. That's the point which I was trying to get. And I got the answer saying it's a 3D view. So from that perspective, if you see O cloud is the layer below it, and then you have the enabler that is actually the IMS and DMS functional realization, which will be latched by the client inside the SMO. We have to read it like that.
So I think we should then create 2 layers. One is our O cloud, and then nephew, and then SMO FOCOM.
Yeah, I'll answer it in one thing.
Okay,
maybe Alexis is waiting for long. Let's take Alexis'
let's see
question
what
and answer
Alexis says, and then what I'm going to do is probably ask for someone to give me a better picture. But go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, sure.
Alexis, thank you, and thank you, everyone. I think this is a good discussion. My comment is the following. I think, and Wim put it actually in the chat. I don't understand why in the SMOs, FOCOM and NF1 are part of a workload cluster. That can't work, right? Because that workload cluster can't be deployed if the management cluster doesn't exist. But the management cluster cannot be deployed if the SMO functions don't exist, right? So I believe the SMO depicted in this picture, FOCOM and NFO, should be part of a NFO management cluster, and that entity should be able to deploy another NFO management cluster in an OCloud, and so basically distribute the responsibility of managing that OCloud within that OCloud, right, as part of the OCloud Genesis.
Right.
So I think that was my first comment, is that depicted in the chart right now, we have NFO workload cluster and SMO. I think this should be a NFO management cluster. That's my first comment, because it is about creating within an OCloud, the OCloud Genesis that will supply the IMS, and then will enable the creation of workload cluster in the OCloud and so on. My second comment is more of a nitpick. I see you have the DMS here overlapping 2 clusters in the OCloud. I think we could be slightly more accurate and have one DMS only. I mean, we could deploy functions in the management cluster as well, but I think the goal is to have the DMS on workload clusters only. And so maybe have a stacked view for the workload clusters, where we can see that the NFO will not, there is not only one interface for DMS from an NFO standpoint. SMO will discover all the DMSs through IMS, and so NFO will have multiple DMSs that it can talk to. And right now it eludes that there is only one. But I think it's just a nitpicking, because I believe you were trying to depict that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to depict the number of clusters or number of sites, right? I was just trying to get just a general interface and where services for that function, right? The subservices for that function would reside. If we're saying that with respect to the DMS, that all the services of the DMS will reside in the NFO workload cluster, I'm okay with that as well, right? We thought that there was some services that were associated with the DMS that may very well need to be part of a management cluster of an OCloud.
So yeah, but it depends how much you delegate to that management cluster, and then that management cluster become the NFO. So I not necessarily, we don't have to debate this further today. I'm not sure I'm in agreement with the fact that within the OCloud, the management cluster should have a DMS endpoint. I believe it should be only the workload cluster, but I'm fine to debate this further down the road. I think my main point is more on the SMO and the management cluster there.
Okay, and I think I'm fine with it. We'll have to figure out what that means in terms of multiple management clusters, but I'm fine with that. But okay, so hey guys, if you already had your hand up and you haven't spoke, if you could lower your hand so I can make sure that we've got everyone. Wim, you were going to say something? I think you're next.
I think it's next me and then.
Okay, so
yeah,
Wim,
I was. I'm
go ahead, Bim. I will give you a chance. I will go after you.
No. I'll after Sashu. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Cool.
No, guys, I'll take it last.
Tell me what the session is.
Well, thank you. To your point, so I think it's next is me, so probably I'll speak.
Okay, that's fine, Bob.
Yes.
So yeah, I think this particular diagram that we have right now makes more logical sense. But with that said, I'm with Tim. It may be confusing when we have 2 NFO management clusters here. From a purely, let's understand the semantics of NFO management cluster. So the management cluster in the NFO context is responsible for orchestrating infrastructure, that is, and then orchestrating workloads and configuring workloads. So obviously the FOCOM does not fall into that particular bucket. So what I think is the SMO layer where you put all those things. It is just a cluster, but NFO principles could be used to deploy the cluster, right? And for example, we could use the same GitOps mechanism, same we can write a package variant and stuff like that, and we can use NFO principles to deploy the SMO, but the SMO itself, purely from a semantic perspective, is not NFO management cluster.
Okay.
So So this looks better than before, but if you can, yeah, that's where.
Guys, we can do this, right?
Yes.
In fact, this might make sense. Let's do the simplest approach first.
Yes.
Let's not say
This is the
anything.
simplest one. Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
If someone needs to annotate
Yeah.
the that further with respect to placement into a workload or a management cluster, let's bring that out, and someone can bring that out and explain what they're talking about. My point was is that I was looking at I was going back to says we may very well want to deploy SMO in a Nefio workload cluster, for example. But
Yeah.
we're not saying. But I'm gonna step back from that and say, okay, let's not worry about that right now, and we'll worry about that when the need arises.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm actually very happy with this diagram that you have right now. So after you removed it. So my second question is now if we are going to obviously I understand obviously I'm not well versed with ORAN like Tim, you or Alexi or Seshu or Wim. But my understanding is from a DMS perspective, a Kubernetes cluster, since there's a KX profile, we need not actually have to develop a service, any specific service for that, because it's all Kubernetes native APIs. From the IMS perspective, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. So if Nefio is committed to do that, let's say at this point of time, management and monitoring APIs are defined. So basically we will have to provide the REST endpoints, which is not intent based, obviously, to service those IMS APIs. That's one thing. And also we will have to provide an endpoint for subscription of alarms, and then provide those alarms as well. So since the management cluster is the main point here that is providing the I2 IMS service, it's going to provide the alarms for all of the workloads clusters it is managing. So obviously we are talking about scalability, we are talking about REST endpoints. So is that the intention of?
So typically when you look at the services, right, the DMS services, they do have, so the IMS is regarding the infrastructure, the DMS is regarding the workload itself. So if you have infrastructure alarms, right, alerts, it'll come through the IMS. If you have workload related alerts or alarms, it'll come through the DMS.
Yeah. Yeah, true. But the thing is, even the any inventory related thing, let's say we have a problem with the CPU. There's alarms related to CPU, right, of a workload cluster that has to come via IMS.
Yeah, that's the IMS.
Yes. So where are we providing an aggregated, let's say, sync point for all the workload clusters, say a Prometheus alert manager, which is aggregated in the management cluster? Is that
now you're getting into design?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to avoid that right now because I'm trying to say what we're doing at 30,000 feet to go back to the network architecture.
Got it. Okay. So essentially, I mean, I just want to know. So that's the ask. How we want to do, we'll discuss later.
Yeah, we'll get to that as soon as we get to these, actually deciding which stories we want to do for release 3, because, in talking with Seishu and Alexis, even the OSC software and Alexis, right now they may very well be only able to bite off inventory and cluster provisioning. So we'll get to all those points, but the design still has to happen. If we're trying to do a design on this diagram, we're going to fail miserably, guys. It's got to have that level.
Okay, cool. Okay, those were some of the points. I'm done. Yeah.
Okay, so I think Wim, you're next.
Okay, yeah. So I think, see, is it correct that I believe that in this whole framework we are missing an intermediate layer in Nefio that we haven't defined so far? So in other words, you have the management cluster, you have the OCloud is typically a collection of multiple clusters, right? So it's not just one; it's a multitude of them, right? And
well,
what you typically
there's 3 tiers to that, Wim. Just to let you know, is that there's the OCloud, which is logical. there are OCloud sites, which get a little bit
Yeah.
more geographic physical, and then there's clusters that are deployed within a site. That's the, 50,000
so it's
point
even
view.
four-dimensional. That's even four-dimensional, so on, right?
It can be multi-dimensional actually. Yeah.
But it all gets down to the cluster.
No, sure. At the end of the day, that's to run on the cluster. But here is my proposal for now, right? I think so the way we have depicted Nefio for now, just to resolve some of the confusion, is our management cluster at the moment is our coordination hub, if you will, right? So if you need to manage multiple entities together, that's where the management cluster is. And that's also why I believe at the moment you have this DMS at both sides, right? Because typically when you look at an OCloud, if you look to an architecture like all-around, you probably have elements of that DMS that live within that, let's say, cluster on which those workloads reside, right? But you have, and you need to make local decisions based on information you get, but you also have a coordination function within the DMS that potentially aggregates some of this information and then takes action based on that, right? So, and today that coordination element in Nefio is our management cluster so far, and most likely to be able to do the all-round right, we have to potentially add intermediate layers to this. But I think for now, to make it simple, is just to say that our management cluster is our coordination layer, and if we have to, we can always add intermediate layers to do so, right? Because if you look to observability, just to answer some of the questions, we have, that's exactly what we are depicting, is we have, let's say, observability locally within the workload cluster. So we aggregate information and we send it towards a more central point. Whether there is one intermediate hub that we need to send this to, that's not a problem at the end of the day, right? So, but I think for now, so in Nefio, we only define those two layers, but what I'm hearing is that we need to probably going forward add more intermediate layer. But I would say for now, let's use the management cluster as that, and maybe we should discuss that in the SIG 1 architecture meeting as a point of discussion on how we deal with this.
And what would you call then the Nefio workload cluster, Wim?
So for now, what I see is that in the all round, at the end of the day, for me, we these are both workload clusters in the context of Nefio right now. So this intermediate coordination in Nefio terminology right now, it's also a workload cluster.
Oh,
but we
I see.
probably need to build a hierarchy in that because one will be, you could say, a more of a coordinating workload cluster, and maybe you have to give it another name, right? But I'm just trying to clarify my view and what I heard to see where the problems or some of the confusion are coming from. So and that's why I would if you look at that architecture, so I would depict DMS, I would basically cut it into pieces for me. So because you have the DMS that does some coordination, and you have DMS that are locally within the workload cluster, and that probably helps also to solve the confusion. So
yeah, but I can't do that here. I've got to break that down later, Wim. This is be too much information.
But so then you probably solve a bunch of the discussion points, I'm assuming. But okay, sorry, I'll shut up.
No. So here's our split between the coordination and workload.
And I have some immediate reaction, but I think Ravi and Sishu are in line.
Okay. All right. So, guys, it's 10:46. So we got 4 minutes. Again, okay, we got 10:46. So we got 4 minutes. So let's get Sishu and then Ravi, and then we'll close it out there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Ravi, you want to go first? Maybe I'll take later.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure, thanks. So again, this is again coming to that point of where Nefio resides. When you talk about an OCloud, right? At least in my perspective, an OCloud, the way we have the SMO and the multiple OCloud is something that's provided by, could be coming from multi-vendor OCloud providers, and the SMO is supposed to provide an interoperable interface to it. And the granularity of that OCloud could be going as far as, saying that it could be sitting in the cell site itself. It could be a single node deployment, or it could be a private edge kind of an instance. To basically say that you're putting the Nephew management system right at those edges may not be. I don't think you would. It's something that you would be distributing a Nephew management system and in that level of granularity too. So in that sense, I think that placement of Nephew management cluster, that's very much close to an implementation. I'm little bit not I can't picture that kind of deployment in my mind, right? So I'm just coming from even from the perspective of how we defining CRDs. For example, we have the network function topology CRD, right? It fundamentally says that, okay, I want to create say a CU, a DU, or a CUCP or CUUP instances in these set of edge clouds, right? That's a fundamental CRD. I don't think those CRDs will be kind of consumed the way you have depicted in the architecture right now. That Nephew management system is somewhere sitting much higher at the regional level or at the central level, looking at this edge OCloud instances that is fundamentally distributed, and it's choosing the set of clouds to deploy these network functions. So I should also think from that perspective, in the sense like how are the current CRDs being thought about, and does it actually fit in this picture or not? So that picture, you have to actually show how the distributed nature of OCloud, and then say in that context, where do you want network management sitting? Is it sitting in each individual OCloud, which is distributed, or is it sitting outside, coordinating functions across this OCloud instances? So unless we have that picture, I think there's a conflict between what Oran is trying to probably arrive at, and probably what Nephew is trying to do.
All right, so that you confused me on several points there. So I don't. So again, so the choice that we have, guys, is we can do this bottom up, or we can do this top down. And bottom up says I can go in and just like they did for release 2, they can go in and create all the deployment architectures, that we would have, edge, regional, core, and we can put the functions in there that we think they're part of the OCloud software, and we can put the NFs and the DUs in there. We could do that, right? I was trying to come from a top-down perspective of just saying, hey, look, we've got Nephew workload concepts of Nephew workload clusters, Nephew management clusters, and we know that these functions that offer these services, some will be offered through the from the workload clusters, and some will be offered from a management cluster. That's what I was trying to get at there, right? So, but there is only one, Wim, to add your point here, from the IMS to the FOCOM, there's only one endpoint, right? But from a DMS,
and I think
DMS has
my point. Yeah, the point that I was making is exactly the confusion that Rafa is highlighting, I think, right? So so most likely, I would say right now is that coordinate. I think, Ravi, let's forget the topology CRD, because that's an experiment at the moment, right? So looks more at the other components that we have so far, right? I think those will fit as far as I can see. So the topology one is still a bit of is something we are experimenting with, right?
No. What I'm saying is, isn't that one of the the granularity at which you want to expose Nephew, the APIs that you want to, because
hey guys, let's do this. So Ravi, let's do this. Could you guys do me a favor? Just go ahead and create what you think your view. Let's start with this, right? And then create a view off of this, and we can discuss that, right? Because we're running out of time for any further discussion today. So if you can bring your view, maybe we can have a better view of it. Same thing, Wim, or anyone else, right?
Yeah, sure. I can give you my picture, mental picture, what I have. Sure, I'll do that, no problem.
But remember, we're trying to get this at, the 40,000 viewpoint to discuss this with network architecture. So be careful of details. Seshu, your final before we get back to the...
Thanks, guys. I think the point which I was trying to make is something which is very simple. I mean, I agree to Tim that we have to either take bottom-up or top-down approach. For ORAN, it was easy. I mean, we discussed about this. Me, Tim, and Sagar were discussing of this yesterday, and we found that top-down approach is easy for us to depict it. From that perspective, the entry point for all these things from SMO is IMS, right? Irrespective of what we do. The details of it, as Tim also said, Alexi was talking about, Wim also was talking about it. Details of it, we will explore it further.
For infrastructure, Seishu, right? There's also the entry point is the DMS.
Yes. I'm saying even the implementation details of how it will be depicted using Nefio. Okay, that's what we have to dig into, and that's where the questions from Ravi and Bala also were coming up, right? But from the perspective of a concept behind ORAN, the IMS endpoint is the SPOC, single point of contact for the SMO, and I'm talking from SMO perspective here. So that is a point which is for my entry, and that is what will create the clusters. Then I'll hand over it over to DMS, which again is done by the same guy, the SMO, but with a different entity called NFO, and that is the one which will be deploying the payloads on the specific cluster which were created in my first step.
That's right.
Right.
That's
this transition is what we have to make sure that this transition is what we depict from Nefio, and that is what the intention of this entire thing has been. Okay. So what again? I was trying to suggest the same. I think we got it in the previous thing that let's try to see. This diagram is really good. I have no problem on the diagram which has been put forward by Tim. I'm thanking Tim for that. So let's try to also put again, Tim. It's good that I'm actually saying the same thing, that we can actually create those individual diagrams. But again, that's for future discussion, not right now. Yeah. Perhaps we can see how we can depict it in different diagrams. Actually, the point which I was also making along with Rohit, which said, right. See, the issue for me was, if you see from ORAN perspective, OCloud is shown down, right? And then all these payloads which you're talking is actually shown on top, right? So here, when I see OCloud on top, I want to make sure where that OCloud is coming. Now I understand from the depiction, it's a 3D view, not a 2D view as it's shown in ORAN. That was a confusion point. So perhaps we can map it to the ORAN diagram where you're getting what I'm saying, right, guys? I mean, you have the OCloud, you have the SMO, and all the G-node base, including the OU, OCU, ODU, RIC, and the near real-time, the non-real-time RIC, everything is shown between those two elements, right? But ideally, they are all on the OCloud. They're all in the fabric. So that was the confusion. I mean, that's a point which I want to clarify, whether it's actually talking about a 2D diagram or 3D diagram. Now it's clear to me what he's trying to depict here. And it's in line to my understanding also. From Nefio perspective, as we said, I mean, Tim also is reiterating it that we have to dig into the detail. That is where the implementation comes into picture. And I'm with Wim, yes, that we require to have those intermediate layers which can actually have these depictions done better. That's something which we have to dig together as a team, right? That's the whole point.
Okay, so but Seishu, let's do this then. If you think that there's an additional information diagram, add it here, and we'll have a discussion with it. Like, bring Ravi, and that way next week we can have that discussion, right? Okay.
So I'll try for next week because I have the IMC. I'll be pretty busy with the entire week, but I'll try to do whatever it is. If not next week, but give me 2 weeks from there. Okay, sure.
Okay, and then we'll just talk about what Ravi's piece is, guys. But we're going to have to close on this. My point, and I'll make that point now, right? If you look at what we're doing, and we only got 5 minutes left, right? So we only got 5 minutes left. So just real quick, if we look at this, we've got to take this deployment architecture, what objectives are we going to do for at least release 3, and some identification of some stories that we want to do. All this work, we're going to have to take that to the network architecture team so that they can see and agree, if you will, as much as agreement as we have, that this is what they would think would be appropriate for release 3. So we got to kind of get some agreement from the network architecture team. There's also, and I asked John and Wim about what they need in terms of network automation, when they need their stuff like the deployment architecture, the blueprint, the operators, any APIs that we've identified. Maybe there's some other SIG automation impacts that they're going to say that they need. Right now, they're talking about January 31st. My point is, the first one, if it's December 1st, that gives us only about 3 weeks, 3 or 4 more meetings to get these pieces of it done, right? Okay, so next week we can continue discussion on this, but if we're well into November, right, and we're still discussing the architecture, you know, we're not going to be able to talk to the network architecture team. So I'm just giving you a little bit of pressure just to say, guys, we've got to come to some consensus on what these diagrams look like. So as you put them in there, if you would do that quickly, that would help. Okay. The other piece is on notes. Could you guys help me out with some of these notes? So again, it sounded like we need to separate the O cloud from the Nepio enablers in the diagrams, right? In the architecture diagram. I think I understood that to be the case. And if I was wrong, please tell me.
Yeah, that's what we have to do as a first pitch-up of it.
Yeah, and then what I heard was that we noted that we needed to define the responsibilities of the DMS and IMS as it relates to the management and workload
Clusters,
right?
Yes, and
the one thing-
the other point, sorry,
ahead,
I just want to add one more point, which Wim made, is that maybe we require some intermediate bodies also, if needed be, if there is a need
Require
to.
what? I'm sorry, say that again.
Intermediate.
Intermediate, okay.
Right. He was talking about the intermediate clusters also, right? I mean, again, I don't want to say cluster there, but maybe intermediate body, right? Intermediate functional bodies.
Well, and that's exactly my point.
Yeah,
that is what we have to explore.
No, but we removed the management cluster as part of SMO, but that could be what supplies that whatever layer that you've been talking, I believe.
No. Alexi, I'm with you for that. I was just trying to put the point which Wim raised so that we have that on the board. We will discuss of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that was as well what I wanted to discuss is I would have framed it, discuss whether NFO and FOCOM are part of a Nepio management cluster. I think this is, if not, then we need to have that intermediate layer as discussed.
Yes,
right? I mean,
this
is the discussion, what it is about.
Yeah, that's alternative area you're talking about. I agree.
Management cluster, right?
No, I think
did I get that?
NFO and FOCOM, not SMO and FOCOM.
Oh, yes,
sorry. Yeah. Wait,
no worries.
The too many terminologies.
No, yeah, this is exactly the point, Tim, and I think this is an outstanding question. We can.
That is my point too, right? Yeah.
All right. So, guys,
but thank you, Tim, for starting this. This is great.
Was there any other points that I need to document?
When are we meeting for a beer?
All right. So if you could do me a favor, though, when you come back to this, right? If you could, we need to address these action items in here. So I need you to add, you know, what you think resolves some of these open pieces, right? And put it up in here, and then we'll work this out to a final piece. But if you could do that, that would help, right? Between now and
one request, Tim, if you can put the link in the chat, please.
Yeah, so all this, just to let you know, all this is sitting up here in the network architecture.
Google Docs, right?
Yeah, ORAN, and then we're working in the deployment architecture. So I'll just copy that link and paste that bad boy. It's also in the agenda, so it's there as well, right? So we'll just copy that link and I'll put it in the chat for you.
Thank you.
All right, great discussion. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, guys.
All right.
Hey, I appreciate it. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Keep chatting, guys. So we'll get this solved. Thanks.
Bye-bye.